Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Know Your History podcast. History recalls, history remembers, history never forgets. Don't forget your history, know your destiny. Well, ladies and gentlemen, today we are dealing with the split of the Xhosa kingdom into two different independent kingdoms. Independent kingdoms of Amagdaleka in the former Transkei and Amahaghabe in the former Ciskei. So this is going to be a huge podcast today. We have decided to break it up into 3 episodes. Today's episode will be dealing with the overview, a broad overview of what happened, and we'll be touching on some issues that are very important to know before we get to the discussion about the breakup of the Xhosa kingdom. Issues like the succession process. Did AmaXhosa have a process of succession after death of the king or the chief? If so, was it broken and that led to the split? We're also going to be talking about the biography of Phalo, King Phalo, the man that was sitting and reigning when the split happened. So today's episode will be divided into 3, as I say. The next episode will be dealing with the issues of the split itself. We'll go deeper into that discussion. How bad was it? The civil war, who won it? When was the decision taken for Haghabe to leave and go establish himself where he is now in the former Ciskei, around Stutterheim? And then on the 3rd episode, we'll be looking at the Nhlapo Commission, because the Nhlapo Commission was looking at all the kingdoms of South Africa. And these two kingdoms, Amahaghabe and Amagdaleka, were also in the spotlight of that commission. We'll talk about that. On that episode, we'll bring 2 experts. One expert is a professor of history, and the other expert is an active lawyer who was representing Amahaghabe in court after their recommendations during the Nhlapo Commission. So that's basically the spread of this episode, today's episode, which will be divided into 3. So back to the cow, as they say, must be Lengomin. There's differing and different opinions about what led to the split of the kingdom of AmaXhosa. The first one, I'm just going to go through them just briefly, is that this was a clash of egos. 2 brothers clashing over authority. The first one, Haghabe, is a bigger brother. He's a right-hand son of King Phalo. The second one, Gcaleka, is a great son. He's an heir to King Phalo. So the story goes, on his return from the initiation school, and after he had twasad, and he had graduated to be Igqirha, Gcaleka started getting egocentric and pushing his weight around at home, playing like a true heir, even disrespecting his own father. Haghabe, as an older brother, tried to play his role to stop him. That's the first theory. This led to a clash. The second one is that actually Haghabe felt the existential threat because Gcaleka was now Itwasa or Igqirha. He had started smelling out witches, and a lot of people were being killed. Haghabe felt threatened by this, that, look, my younger brother is the royal blood. He has power to smell even other royal people. whereas ordinary amagqirha would not have had that kind of power or authority to smell the royal people. So there was a possibility that my younger brother could smell me out as igqirha and then I could be killed. That's another theory. So the war happened. The third one points to the astuteness of King Paulo himself, that King Paulo actually instigated the breakup for two reasons. After the war, he wanted to make sure that there's peace in the house of Paulo. He also wanted to make sure that he initiates a program of expansion of his house. So he released his elder son Chagabe, gave him provisions, gave him people, gave him cattle, and allowed him to go and establish himself somewhere else. So Chagabe went and established himself beyond the Kai River west and settled around what we today call Stutterheim. But ladies and gentlemen, that's a topic that we'll get to deeper in the next episode. Please allow me as we go forward to take you back a little bit so that I can bring you back with me and you don't get lost over these 3 episodes. Last time we talked about the building of the Xhosa nation. Today we're talking about the separation or the splitting of the Xhosa nation kingdom. I gave you a brief biography of the founder of AmaXhosa, uChawe, how he usurped power and overthrew his big brother, uGqirha, and installed AmaChawe as the royal clan of AmaXhosa. Most importantly, we discussed how Chawe built this nation of AmaXhosa. We talked about his strategy of building what we called a heterogeneous nation, a nation built out of different independent nations. So he built a nation not based on bloodlines, not based on tribe, not based on language lines, as the Khoi were speaking different language from the Xhosa, not based on skin tone or race, as the Khoi were different race and skin tone from AmaXhosa. So he weaved this nation, this heterogeneous nation, for the future purposes. Now, this is the nation that Paulo inherited. So before we go forward, let's look at the way of succession, the process of succession within the Xhosa nation. Yes, there was a program, a clear one for that matter. For instance, the first point was all sons of chiefs were chiefs. Abantwana begazi bazalwa ligazi, ngabantu begazi. No outsiders could interfere with that program. And they were ranked according to their mothers. So an heir to the chieftainship would be the son of the great wife, and this heir would be the great son. This great wife, her bride's wealth would be paid by the entire nation. Everybody would contribute into the payment of ilobola of the great wife. And her status would be publicly proclaimed so that there is no confusion as to who she was. Then the second highest ranking wife would be the right-hand wife. She would give birth to the right-hand son. The right-hand son, his job would to serve and assist the great son. And in times of misfortune, maybe the great son perishes without producing an heir, obviously the right-hand son will take over and be the king or the leader of the nation. Then the chief could go on and have other wives. These wives would be called amagadi. Amagadi are minor wives. So that is a process of succession within amaXhosa. Despite this, ladies and gentlemen, being so clear, these rules could be circumvented sometimes for different reasons. For instance, as we've said that the great wife would be taken late in life. So sometimes the king would perish and die and leave the great wife who was younger. And then she would face challenge from the other subsequent brides. Or else the young chiefs would die young, perhaps from diseases, perhaps from wars. But the entire situation now, when the king dies, leaves the state of the nation in a state of fluidness. Everything is fluid. The center is not holding. Even the chief that is contending, a contender chief, at times would be accused of witchcraft and be eliminated on those accusations. So, ladies and gentlemen, these were difficult and very vulnerable for ascending chiefs because their legitimacy was always challenged. But when they were recognized, it was difficult to remove them. Remember, I say difficult, but not impossible, because they could be removed under different circumstances. For instance, whilst the chief is sitting on the throne or on the chair, so to speak, he could be removed for reasons like cruelty. A meeting would be called, he would be investigated thoroughly, a verdict would be passed. If found guilty, he'll be removed for being cruel to the nation. Or a chief could be removed for reasons of corruption, greediness, and stinginess. Is inwardly looking. He's not spending anything on the nation. He's just taking and taking and taking away from the nation. A meeting could be called, and the chief would be investigated. If found guilty, he would be removed on the basis of stinginess or greediness, which is basically corruption. And then the third point, which is very interesting, a chief could be removed for stupidity, utter stupidity. He will be evaluated that the decisions that he's taking are a risk to the nation. They don't go in line with the norm. He's getting influences somewhere else, and all of those things. He's not really a man in charge, and then it could be removed. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've paid a lot of attention to this process of taking over after the king has died, because this is exactly what will be shining the spotlight on in our next episode. Were there some transgressions on this rule of succession and all of that? But on that note, ladies and gentlemen, let's leave that there. And now let's get to a biography of uPhalo. Who was Phalo? Phalo was the son of Chiwo. Chiwo was the son of Ngonde. Ngonde was the son of Togu. Togu was the son of Skomo. Skomo was the son of Nwangu. Nwangu was the son of Chawe. Chawe was the son of Nkosiyamntu. So, ngumnombo wamaXhosa lo. That is a Xhosa genealogy. Now, Chiwo did not just have one son, Phalo. He had another son, Gwali, whom I would like us to pay attention to as well, because it's going to be very important in this story as it goes forward. Gwali was the right-hand son of Chiwo, not the great son. And also, Chiwo had a brother. Of course, he had other brothers, but he had this particular brother that I would like to mention because he's going to play a very big role on the ascension of Paulo into kingship. This was Mdange. Mdange was uncle to Paulo, was uncle to Gwali. So that's the state of affairs. Chiwo died on a hunting expedition without producing a son, without producing an heir to the throne with his great wife. His great wife was returned back to her people. And then Gwali, the right-hand son, came over and led the nation. He ruled for a while, a couple of years, many years in fact. And then, out of the blue, came Mdange, producing a son that he proclaimed that was Chiwo's son, saying that no, actually, when everybody believed that the great wife had not conceived, in fact, she had. We just did not want to expose the pregnancy. We concealed it to protect the heir. So obviously, Gwali rejected this. A war ensued between the two of them. Gwali was defeated. He ran across the Kai River west, across the Fish River west, to a place now that we call in this South Africa Somerset East. We will revisit Somerset East, ladies and gentlemen. We will revisit that city from 1779 to 1781. It's a very important city in the history of the defense of this land. That's where the first war in defense of this land happened. So now, Gwali is hiding there. On the other hand, Mdange is acting as a king regent. Upon Paulo's time to reach maturity, Mdange relinquished power to Paulo. And then he, Mdange, again followed Gwali. He crossed the Kai to the west, crossed the Fish River to the west, through the Seerveld, around Grahamstown, past there, and he settled beyond the Seerveld, beyond Grahamstown, further towards where his brother had gone. Now, Paulo reigned from 1728 to 1775 when he died, technically, because we know that actually Paulo succeeded his power to his two sons, Rharhabe and Gcaleka. These two sons were to overshadow their father for the rest of his life. So, somewhere in the middle, Paulo decided that he would follow his other son, Rharhabe, and cross the Kai River. And he went to settle on the banks of the Buffalo River, and the tributary, in fact, of the Buffalo River, called Izeli. Ezelini. So now, ladies and gentlemen, this is in East London, of course. When you go to King Paulo Airport, when you transit through that airport, I think it would be nice to pause and look back into the history of the man and the story of the man that the airport was called after. It just go back to history of amaXhosa through King Paulo. So Paulo stayed there quietly without interfering with his two sons, Gcaleka and Rharhabe. And so he died in 1775. So, ladies and gentlemen, on that sad note, of the death of King Pallo. Let us put a pause and meet again when we discuss this matter further, the matter of the splitting of the Xhosa kingdom into two separate, independent kingdoms. The matter that reigned or sort of prevailed in the mid-18th century and boiled over to the 21st century because the Nhlapo Commission revisited it. So next time, we'll be dealing with those two issues, the split, actual split, and the Nhlapo Commission. History recalls, history remembers, history never forgets. Don't forget your history, know your destiny.